Everybody see the screen at this point? All right. So the question people ask or sometimes infer is they wonder if emotional susceptibility, physical susceptibility, like what's the relationship between those two susceptibilities? A lot of people wonder if, that grief, for example, will cause us, will make us sick, or depression can make us sick, or sadness or anger can make us sick. And we want to explore that idea. We want to explore the idea, of exactly what the relationship is between being in an emotional state and whatever physical susceptibility to disease that we might have at any given time. Okay, let me just make an adjustment here. Oops, no, it doesn't work. Okay, so first I want to define the word susceptibility, because we interpret the word susceptibility to mean weakness, generally speaking. A lot of people think that that's what susceptibility means, is that, you were susceptible, meaning to say that your immune system was weak. And that's a very partial understanding. I'd like to give you the fuller understanding of the root of the word, which is to take up and sustain from the environment. Okay? So susceptibility means sustain, your ability to sustain yourself from what the elements that are in your environment, how you can use your environment to hold up your organism. Now, susceptibility is easiest understood if we look at plants. Okay, so if you have seeds, you can have seeds in a jar for years and years. I think they found some corn seeds and wheat seeds going back to Egyptian times. And when they put them in the right environment, when they put them in a warm, damp soil, 2,000 years later, or even 4,000 years later, the seeds sprouted. So germination occurs, those seeds sprout when the conditions are right. There has to be the right temperature, the right humidity, the right light, depending on the seed. And so the seed is susceptible to its environment. It takes up, it is in relationship to its environment. It has a susceptibility to sunlight because the sunlight guides its growth. It needs the sunlight, obviously, to make food, and we can say that it's susceptible. It gets sustained by sunlight. It also is susceptible to humidity, to wetness, to the rain and to the wetness in the earth. That susceptibility, that response to the humidity in the earth, is what causes the root system to go down into the earth, okay, and to grow roots. And the susceptibility to temperature and the weather is what guides flowering. So a seed will never flower if it's too cold for insects to be out. A plant will only flower if it's warm enough for the bees to be around and sunny enough for the bees to be around. Because if it's rainy, the flowers that are closed will not open in the rain either, because they know that the bees aren't going to be around. So there's a relationship, and we look at things as if they were separate, and we forget that they're all interrelated. And we've been talking about that. That's the principle of holism. We've been talking about that interrelatedness right from the first webinar. That's really been the theme of these webinars, is how all of life is interconnected. And so the plant and its flowering is interconnected to the presence of bees. The plant is susceptible to bees. Okay, it's susceptible to its environment. So susceptibility is the inherent capacity for any living organism to respond to the whole movement of the cosmos, to everything in its environment. Sunlight, weather, rain, where the stars are, it's all part of the hollow movement. And we are sustained by the cosmos. We are sustained by the whole movement. And that's the pictures we've been looking at over the last 4 weeks is the energetic diagram of how our energy body, how our energetic flow, how our life force is really the coming together and interconnectedness of many different fields that sustain our lives. So the susceptibility of the organism is its ability to sustain itself by all of these inputs. It's also a measure of the ability of the organism to adapt to its environment in a balanced way. And that's what susceptibility is key, is the word balance. Okay? We are an organism within the hollow movement. So there has to be something that keeps our unique expression together and organized. But at the same time, we have to be open to all the influences and adapting and moving with the cosmos, moving with the hollow movement of life, moving with everything that's in our environment. So susceptibility is that ability to take up information and sustain its own expression. Okay, susceptibility is really what governs all of our reactions to the environment. And we now understand that that susceptibility is regulated particularly by the mitochondria in every cell. And I won't go into too much detail of that today because I've talked about that in other webinars. But that's something that we teach about in Mish, is the latest research that in the mitochondria that helps us explain not only how we adapt and evolve, but also how each organism responds to homeopathic remedies. It's actually through the mitochondria, through the little power, as it used to be known, the powerhouses of every cell. But now we're discovering that they're much more than that. They're actual receptors and emitters. They emit biophotons, they control the nucleus. Anyway, we're discovering a lot more exciting stuff about that, and it's helping us understand how homeopathic remedies work, because homeopathic remedies address the whole organism as a whole, and we were never sure what that mechanism was until very recently. So susceptibility is an important thing. It's really a measure of all of those interactions between the one organism and the whole environment. We are a beautifully orchestrated field of interconnecting waveforms. These interconnecting waveforms, of course, that penetrate, design, form, and inform our entire structure. Okay, so that median point, the susceptibility, we have to be just susceptible enough. We have to be able to take in our environment enough so that we are sustained by it, but at the same time, be self-contained enough, have those boundaries and be self-contained enough so that we keep our organism together as a whole within that greater whole. Okay, so at any given time, though, that balance point, that balance between what we take in from the outside and what we keep in, is moving. And it's during times of adaptability, of greatest adaptability, when we are evolving, when we're growing. We know that, for example, children get colds very often, and that's because they're evolving and growing so quickly. So that middle point between what they take up from their environment and what is individualized within them is always moving. It's always changing. Susceptibility is probably the most important tool of evolution. It's what keeps all of the life forms evolving and evolving together as well as one whole. And so as we know, right, our organism is changing all the time. Our inner lining changes every 5 days. If you have a stomach ulcer, really it should only last 5 days, because that's when the whole stomach lining is changed. So if you have a stomach ulcer for more than 5 days, it's because there's a disturbance that is recreating that stomach ulcer every 5 days. You see, the understanding that we have of disease is much more dynamic. We know that the body actually creates its disease and renews the disease. It's not like you get a disease and then you get stuck there. It's that there is something creating it in your body, and that's what we can address with homeopathy. Of course, every molecule in our skeleton changes every 7 years. You get a brand new skeleton every 7 years. You get brand new skin every few days. So our physical substance, our molecules and our atoms as well are in a constant process of change. So every day, every single atom of your body is exchanged with the atoms in the universe, in the air that you breathe, and the water you take in, and the food that you eat. So by the end of your life, there's probably not a single atom left that was there at the beginning. You've been completely renewed and rechanged. So you see there's something therefore that allows for all of this change, all of this renewal, all of this new stuff to come in, and yet keeps the integrity of that organism so that we look the same every day, even though we have all new components and all new molecules and all new atoms and all new cells, right? So if we understand ourselves dynamically, we understand that our emotional, mental, and vital substances are constantly forming and reforming. There's always new impulses, new attitudes, and new outlooks that want to be born, that want to be given birth to and integrated, and old stuff that we need to let go. So our life should be dynamic. The more dynamic our life, the more we bite into life, allow life to change us, and allow ourselves to let go of the old and embark in the new, the more vital we are. So we're being asked to integrate new stuff in every moment of our living existence. And this integration is sometimes difficult. Sometimes we resist certain changes in our lives. We don't accept that certain things have happened. Losses are particularly hard to accept. So we then, therefore, stay in a place where we are resisting that change, consciously or unconsciously. In times where we're stuck, in other words, where change needs to happen, but we're unable to adapt, we're unable to accept, we want things to stay the same, we hold on to things, that's what gets in the way of the integration process and the evolutionary process. And that's probably the biggest contribution to us saying susceptible in an unhealthy way and actually taking in things that we shouldn't be taking in, such as pollen if we're allergic, or bacteria or viruses. So the times that we stay in this heightened susceptibility, if you like, of taking in information from our environment in order to adapt. If we can't adapt, if there's something blocking that adaptation and integration, then we stay there too long. And yes, that's where illness and disease and contagious disease and all sorts of things can happen. Okay, so what is disease? And we go into a lot more detail about what illness and health are in Yumi Dynamic Health. So this is just a little introduction. But what we understand disease and illness to be is always an opportunity. It's an opportunity for the expression of a new dynamic in your life. It's an opportunity to integrate something new in our life, an opportunity for new awareness to grow. Sometimes we don't feel ready for that awareness, but that's where people at Mish and true healers, especially holistic health people, are there to hold space for us, to help us see what needs to be integrated and how we can do that, what we might be resisting. So our illnesses, or when we get sick, it's very often pointing to some kind of limit, some kind of limitation, some kind of threshold that we've encountered in our capacity to integrate at any given time, or at any given developmental stage. And we're always developing. We don't stop developing at 20 or 21. We're always going into new phases in our lives, all the way to the moment we die. There's always a new phase. There's always a new stage. So illnesses occur. We see them as opportunities. They are there to, because we are stuck in the susceptibility, because we are in this place where we need to move to new levels of awareness and differentiation. the illness will bring awareness to perhaps what is in the way and how to do that. So related to that, of course, are going to be emotions. I mentioned grief earlier. Obviously the emotion of grief and sadness is often there when we can't accept the death of a dear one, which is normal, But the illnesses that occur from grief aren't from the emotion of grief. They're because of the inability of us mentally, emotionally, sometimes physically, to adapt to this new situation where our loved one has disappeared. So it's that is really at the root of our increased susceptibility to disease in those points of our lives. Okay, so the whole thing is connected. Stiffness in our muscles. So when we're resisting change, our muscles are more stiff in certain areas of our body, and therefore we're more susceptible and to hurting ourselves when we do physical work, to spraining an ankle, for example, or twisting a part of our body. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And when those things happen in our lives, they're not just coincidence. They're very often related to something that's going on a bigger scale. Okay, so we experience our realities through the discomforts of our bodies as they adapt to new situations. And it's when we're able to explore those discomforts that we get new insights. Okay, so what I wanted you to go away with tonight is that changes in our circumstances, in our environment, bring on changes in our susceptibility. Because what our body is trying to do is trying to take up more information. It's trying to discover and find out how to adapt to the new situation. And changes in our susceptibility, okay, are there when the organism, okay, sees that it must adapt to new circumstances and new environment. Our susceptibility will stay high until an adaptation strategy is worked out. And we see that actually in the studies of the mitochondria, how when we're in the process of change, how the mitochondria are seeking out information in all the different ways that they do that. So prolonged high susceptibility just shows that our life force is struggling. So when you get one cold after another or one earache after another, and then you twist your ankle, and then all of these things happen, it's really time to say, okay, I'm struggling, my organism, my whole being is struggling with something right now. What am I struggling with? Let me sit back, let me meditate, let me contemplate my life at this moment and see what I might be struggling with. Okay, so when we don't adapt, when we don't evolve when we need to, that compromised susceptibility will lead to symptoms and disease. So what we have to understand, of course, is changes in susceptibility are not just with bad things either. They're also with good things, like getting a new job and being excited about a new job, or, starting a new program, or moving somewhere new, or getting a new home. Well, that's a positive stress, but it's nonetheless a stress, and it requires adaptability. So very often people get sick when good things happen in their lives, and they think, why is this happening? Doesn't matter whether it's good or bad. It's an adaptation nonetheless. Okay, so it's always a sign that evolution is occurring. These are important points for the organism. And, what I love about my practice is that, I teach my patients learn about themselves, discover themselves through our inquiries together. And they get to know when they're susceptible, when their susceptibility is high. And they call me before they get sick because they can feel that they're a little bit out of balance, that they're a little bit too susceptible. And they say, oh, Julianne, can I see you? Let's inquire and see what I might be resisting. Let's inquire to see what this next threshold or this new invitation is in my life, so that I can see so that I can work with it. Okay, so most of us know this, but we tend to ignore it. We're feeling a little off. We'll say, oh, I've been off, but we try to brush it under the carpet and just go on, with our routine and with the same things that we do, demanding the same things that we do, and not taking that time to do that. And that's part of the problem in our society. Even when we get sick, we just take antibiotics and continue to go to work, even though our body is saying, look, you got sick because I want you to stay home and think about your life a little bit. So we very often know the circumstances which surround it. It's always surprising to ask people, say, well, what happened in your life that you think might be contributing? They know the answer, but they never think about it, or hadn't thought about it until I asked them. So it's a very important question to our patients is, what changes, what's happening in your life right now? Okay, so yeah, the changes in conditions in our life are often met with emotions. And what are emotions? They're energy in motion, like we talked about the last couple of weeks. Okay, so things are changing. And we meet those changes with sadness if it's not what we hoped for, with fear and apprehension if we don't know where this change is taking us, and we feel a little insecure about that, and we like to control our lives, then we feel fear and apprehension or anxiety, and anger if we refuse to accept what's happened. So different emotions depending on the way we're responding or reacting to what's going on in our lives. But it's not those emotions that cause our illness. They're not the reason we get sick. They are a sign that our susceptibility is struggling with something, struggling with a change. And other than change, there is also what we call striving that triggers our susceptibility and emotions. Okay, so we just talked about change all this time, but it's not only change that triggers our susceptibility, it's also when we strive. Our susceptibility is increased also when we're trying to get, accomplish, or attain something. When we try to make some one thing in our lives more important than anything or everything else. When we try to prove ourselves or hold on to a definition of ourselves and prove ourselves to others. When our self-concept, our idea of ourselves is stuck or fixed, and we want everyone to have the same opinion of us, and we're worried about that opinion. When our thoughts start, being preoccupied about what people think, or what I said and how they interpreted that, or what people think of me, then we know that we're stuck in some kind of self-concept. And that causes a lot of stress, perhaps the most stress in our organism. It's been measured again by the levels of DHEA and cortisol and the reactions of the mitochondria, just telling people that they're going to be judged or evaluated by a group. So we put a lot of importance in what other people think of us. We just have to look at Facebook, right, and get that idea. Also, what goals we're identified with and what we might be identified with. And what we want to see is, what do all of these have in common? So if we look at all of these different aspects here, and we ask the question, well, what do all of these have in common? What could we say? Our self-concept, what we're trying to get, what we make more important than anything else, what we're trying to prove or hold on to, what our self-concept is, what we're trying to perfect or make perfect, or even make ourselves perfect, what goal we're identified with. Okay, what we see here in all of these is attachment. We're attached to a result. We're attached to a self-concept. We're attached to an identity. We're attached to what people think of us. And when we're attached to something, can we move? And that's what keeps us stuck. So attachment is the opposite of life, because life is dynamic and movement. And therefore, the detachment is really, really key and very important. Okay, so changes in circumstances and environment, or over-identification and attachment, are concurrent with changes in susceptibility. Okay, so it's either changes in our circumstances or this over-identification and attachment, okay, that will somehow be related to changes in our susceptibility. And when that happens, there's physical dimensions to it and emotional dimensions to it. And we'd be able to explore those dimensions to find out where we're attached, what we're attached to, what we need to let go, where the change needs to happen, what do we need to evolve to, where we can grow and use this experience to grow. Okay. All right. I'm going to stop my sharing. I was a little distracted there because I think I had a neighbor banging on my door and yelling for me. Anyway, I'll find out what that was about a little later. So anyway, so that's our little thing on susceptibility. Okay, it's a very broad topic and one that we revisit and visit over and over again because it's also a very deep topic. To understand that we say, oh yeah, I believe in body mind. I know that the body and the mind are connected. Well, that's very different saying they're connected than to know that they're really one and that they are just different dimensions of one thing. And what is that one thing? What is that one source of life within us, the vital force, our soul, and all of these dimensions, physical, emotional, mental, are all dimensions of that one expression. No? Okay, so for in our process, when someone comes with chronic illness, it's very important for us to explore those dimensions, to see what they're attached to see what was happening in their environment, and then we can really get to how we can help them move in the next step. And that's where homeopathy is like super powerful, because it helps us release our attachments and it helps us engage and embrace with that new step. Okay, so that was my little introduction, and yeah, more than 15 minutes as usual. So if you have a hand, Cora has a question.